Okay, Algebra 2. We're getting ready to start the next unit, which is trigonometry. Done with logarithms. So what we did today, this should mostly be a review from stuff you did in geometry. So most of this should be familiar. I know most of you are familiar with, sine, cosine, tangent, all that. So we're going to start with some basics of triangle trigonometry. The first thing I want you to recall is the Pythagorean Theorem. If you remember that formula for that, it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And each of those letters refers to a side of the triangle, or side of a triangle. Okay. Now the a and b sides don't really matter which one's which, but the c side has to be what's called the hypotenuse, or the longest side. Okay. And the longest side is always going to be across from the right angle. All right, so C is always called the hypotenuse. It's always the longest side. And on a right triangle, it's always the side across from the right angle. So again, this only works for right triangles right now. So all these triangles are going to have a right angle represented by that box in the corner. It's the 90-degree angle. All right, and like I said, the A and the B values don't really matter which one's which. Okay, as long as they're not the hypotenuse. So what this means is if you know two sides of a right triangle, you could automatically figure out the third side. So again, these are not the hypotenuse. They're called the opposite side and the adjacent side. Okay, and again, it doesn't really matter which one you put for A and which one you put for B. Alright, so let's do a couple Pythagorean Theorem problems. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Alright, so you always want to identify first what you don't know. Okay, or mostly I like to identify where the hypotenuse is first. So this is a right triangle represented with this box in the corner. So across from that box is always going to be side C. So on this problem, we don't know what the hypotenuse is. Alright, which means we do know what A and B are. Let's call it A is 7 and B is 3. Alright, then just plug it into the formula. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So a squared says 7 squared, plus b is 3 squared, equals c, which is x squared. Now 7 squared and 3 squared are just numbers, so we could simplify those. 7 squared is 49, 3 squared is 9. Add those together and it's going to give us x squared. Now again, we don't want to know what x is. Or we don't want to know what x squared is, which is what we currently have. We want to know what x is. Okay. So if we have x squared and we want x, we're going to just take the square root of both sides. So you take square root of that, square root of 58. Okay. Square root of x squared cancels out the squared part, and you're just left with x. And the square root of 58, okay, you're going to need a calculator for these, because that's not a perfect square. It's about 7.6. So make sure on your calculator or your phone or whatever you're using to solve these, you're able to get 7.6 out of that. Alright, now the next problem, again, start by identifying where the hypotenuse is. You got a right triangle, so across from the right angle is side C. So this time we know the hypotenuse. What we don't know is we don't know one of the other legs. We don't know, in this case I'll call it x, I'll call it A, x, and B, 6. So again, the variable is not always going to be in the c squared part. In this case, the variable is on the left side. The a squared is x squared plus b squared, 6 squared, equals c squared, which is 10 squared. Now again, all those numbers squareds are just numbers, so you could simplify those. X squared plus 36 equals 10 squared, which is 100. Alright, so these have one more step involved because you're going to have to get everything to one side. You're going to have to isolate the variable part. So to do that, we're going to have to subtract 36 over. Gives you x squared equals 64. And once again, we don't really care what x squared is. We only care about x. So we're going to have to take the square root of both sides. So in this case, x is 8. So those are really the only two scenarios you're going to have. You're either not going to know the hypotenuse or you're not going to know one of the other sides. But it's always a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Alright, next thing we're going to have to remember from triangle trig is we're going to have to know how to label the sides. So we already kind of did that a little bit. But because of all our trig ratios are in terms of opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, we're going to have to identify those as such. Okay. So based on the given angle, label the sides as opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. Okay. The given angle is going to be whatever angle is marked for us. So in this case, the 46 degrees in the top right, that's going to be our marked angle. Okay. Now the one side that never changes is always the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse, again, is always across from the right angle. So there's the right angle, which means that side is the hypotenuse automatically. It doesn't matter where your angle is, that is always going to be the hypotenuse. Now depending on where your angle, what angle you're using, the other sides do change. So since we're using the top right angle here, because that's the marked angle, the side directly across from that angle is going to be called the opposite side. So I always go in that order. I find the hypotenuse, I find the opposite, and then the adjacent is going to be whatever's left over. It's going to be the side that's right next to the marked angle. Okay. So you're going to have a marked, next to the marked angles, one side's going to be the hypotenuse, the side that's not the hypotenuse is automatically the adjacent. Now again, if we were using a different angle, if we were using this bottom left angle, the hypotenuse wouldn't change, but the opposite and the adjacent would flip. Alright, so same thing on this other one. Now we're using the bottom left angle, and the right angle is also switched. So across from the right angle is always the hypotenuse. Directly across from the marked angle, or again directly opposite of the marked angle, is the opposite side. And then whatever's left over, you got three sides of a triangle, whatever's left over is always going to be adjacent. Alright, so those are just some basics for right now. I'm going to cut the video here, try and make these a little shorter. Make sure to check Google Classroom for the rest of the assignment. Have a great day.